Hi, this is Ken of Rist Innovations. Today, let's talk about upgrades to supercharge your miter saw. I'll cover some common upgrades like zero clearance inserts, but I also will cover some very unique ideas like how to use this Festool hold down to be able to make safer and faster cuts on the miter saw. My favorite idea is how to safely hold small parts on the miter saw, and that's at the end, so you don't want to miss that. So let's go ahead and get started. There are many people that are concerned that a miter station will take up too much room in their small shop. I struggle with this as well. I have a narrow and long shop, so I came up with a half miter station. I bought two mobile tool carts and bolted them together and mounted the miter saw and this Biesmeyer fence system on top. I have a Makita 10-inch sliding compound miter saw. I have great storage under the saw for many of my tools, etc. I don't think you can get the Biesmeyer system anymore, but you could build a simple rail from some plywood and T-tracks. I also installed this Rousseau dust collection hood, which I'll cover later. Whenever I need to support longer pieces, I just roll my workbench next to the miter saw station to the right. I intentionally made the workbench slightly lower than the miter saw station, so I only need to add a half-inch thick piece of plywood to the workbench, and I have a fully supported area for long workpieces. I've been using the miter saw for years, and within the past week I finally replaced the throat plate with a zero clearance throat plate. I made it from ultra high molecular weight polyethylene. It's a soft pliable plastic that won't chip, and the saw cuts it like butter. I cut it to size, drilled the holes, and installed it in a very short time. Another thing I've been meaning to add for a long time is an auxiliary fence for two reasons. One, to reduce tear out, and number two, to have safer cuts for small pieces so they don't go flying into my dust hood, which I can't tell you how many times that has happened. So that I always have minimal tear out, I came up with the idea to have an insert that I can easily replace for making different angled cuts. Someone on Instagram asked a question about the screws in the insert when I need to make beveled cuts, and he brought up a very good question. For me, I rarely cut bevels on my work, so in the event that I would need to make a bevel cut, I will remove the fence and also the zero clearance throat plate and temporarily replace it with the original. I added this rabbet feature to the bottom of the fence so that sawdust doesn't push my workpiece away from the fence and cause me to get an inaccurate cut. Here I'm attaching the auxiliary fence using some screws and washers. Now let's make our first cut into our new insert and fence. Here is a close-up of the new kerf. Now let's look at the benefit of the new insert and fence regarding tear out. The piece on the left is from the original insert and no fence, and you can see there's a lot of tear out. The piece on the right is from the zero clearance insert and the new auxiliary fence, and you can see that there is little to no tear out. So much better. Another benefit of the auxiliary fence is that it's easier to locate the workpiece by lining up the cut line to the kerf in the fence, instead of bringing the blade to the workpiece and constantly having to nudge the workpiece back and forth until you get it to the right spot. I had a Diablo blade in my miter saw for a very long time, but I have recently converted all of my table saw blades to CMT, and I'm very happy with the quality of the blades and the cuts they produce. They also have more carbide on them, so you can have them resharpened a few times, and that will save you money in the long run. This is a special crosscut blade made for sliding compound miter saws because it has a negative hook and it reduces the chance of the blade climbing over the workpiece. I bought a full kerf blade, but if you wanted to save some money, you could buy a thin kerf blade. I never liked the Makita hold down because I couldn't always reach the workpiece, and especially if it was small, it always took a long time to constantly turn and adjust the knob. I always liked the Festool hold down, and I wondered how I could use it on my Makita saw, so I recently came up with this idea. I made it from some scraps of plywood and an 1.25 inch diameter oak dowel. I turned a tenon on one end of the dowel and I drilled a hole in the other end to fit the Festool. I added a threaded insert in the side and added a knob so I could tighten the Festool to keep it from sliding when I tightened the clamp. Here I'm attaching the Festool base to my miter station using lag bolts. The Festool hold down and my base work like a charm. It's easily adjustable for different thicknesses of workpieces, and it securely holds the workpiece. And if it ever gets in the way, I can easily rotate it out of the way. Miter saws are notorious for throwing a lot of sawdust around, and it's difficult to contain it. Many people have built plywood boxes around their saws for dust collection, and some people, such as Travis at Shop Nation, have some 3D printed chutes that appear to work quite well for some models of miter saws. For me, I bought this flexible hood from Rousseau Products a few years ago, and although it's a bit gangly, it does work quite well. I inserted some dowels into the bottom of it to give it some structure because the dust collector was actually sucking the dust hood right into the port, clogging the opening. I've had this Biesmeyer fence system in rail for many years, and it's quite effective. It has an easy to read scale and a very secure lock on the end stop. Unfortunately, I don't think these are available anymore, but you could always build a similar platform out of plywood and some T-track. There are also some commercial tracks that are available that would be easy to install. This is one of my favorite ideas I came up with for safely holding small parts. I've always been concerned with getting my hands too close to the blade when cutting small parts. I was inspired for my metalworking and how this Sureline end mill has these hold downs for parts. I scaled this concept up for the miter saw by building this step block and this hold down strip that I attached rubber to both ends for better gripping. The way it works is that I set the step block here and put the hold down strip on top of the small workpiece, and I use the Festool clamp to secure everything. The cool thing about this design is that it can handle different thicknesses of workpieces. If you like this video, I'd ask that you consider subscribing to my channel. Also, you may like my next video, which is on table saw upgrades, and you can see that link right here. Thanks for watching.